tax experts are now urging the National Treasury to simplify the process of paying tax in a bid to tap into the largely untaxed informal sector. Joining us to discuss that and more is Hadijah Nannyomo, Associate Director for Indirect Taxes at Ernst and Young. Take a look. When we are looking at the budget, obviously the government did not, or the National Treasury did not move away from the estimates they had given out a few weeks before that. Maybe you could tell us, did you see any thinking outside of the box in the making of this budget?
I wouldn't call it thinking outside of the box per se, but it's more the technocrats. Most of the time they are theoretical, and theory is good. They are proper economists, policy makers, but at times the practical bit of it is not really workable. We are all excited about the 6 objectives they wanted to achieve: reducing poverty, equity, improving private sector development and overall economic development. But in terms of the actual measures they want to put in place, the allocations are there. But for me, I normally find it hard, and probably this is the problem why there are always issues and non-performance issues. The implementation is always a problem. They give the budget, they give the allocations, but guidelines and regulations and further details into how exactly things are supposed to be done never come out clearly. And to me, I think that's one of the problems. Because if you just give anyone money and you've not given them clear guidelines on performance, we all work and we get appraised. We are given clear goals, you're given success factors, and you're reprimanded when you don't work. But I'm not seeing this translating so much into the general government and procedures and rules and all that.
And what does that mean for the economy? Because we've had a very expansionary fiscal policy over the last 5 years.
We look at it more as corruption. There's corruption, yes, but also I think we need to look into awareness of the taxpayers, making the taxpayers appreciate that really they need to pay tax, and making it simple. The canons of taxation is supposed to be simple, fair, equitable, That is not coming out. So even when you go to the person who is supposed to pay, there are many people who want to pay tax. But the system is so complicated. Everything is so complicated. When you look at the revenue authorities themselves, still there are a lot of gray areas in the law. Even an administrator trying to administrate or to implement the tax system, they are not corrupt, but they don't know what to do. So there's so many things in that area that really need to be put right, and in a very simple way, not complicated. For me, the issue is complicating and making everything very technical.
Let me throw this to you, because the government has been talking about taxing the informal sector. We've seen a lot of growth in jobs. Last year we were talking about 714 jobs created in the informal sector alone. The formal sector was just above 100,000. So what would be your proposal to the government to tax this group? Because we have a way of counting the jobs created, but we have no way of trying to tap into the taxes. You are talking of simplicity.
I'll go back to my issue of simplicity. When we say something like presumptive tax, what is it? To me, presumptive means you're going to presume something, you're going to assume something, you're going to come to my Juakali place, you look at how many jikos I'm making, you ask me how much I sell each, I'm making today, you're not even looking at a year, and then you're going to come up with your own estimates. That's too complicated. We need to have something simple. We can even just say, let's say 5%. On whichever income they will make. I'm sure everyone, however literate or illiterate they are, knows how much they make a year. Just ask someone how much they make a year. Make it simple, a flat figure, 5%. Get that and move on. But when we keep on complicating everything about the systems, the taxes, the procedures, it really puts us back. And I know the hardest thing to do would be to really educate and give awareness to the informal sector, people who are semi-literate or illiterate or even literate but illiterate in this kind of area.
Looking at the tax measures that have been proposed by the National Treasury, what will work so much for the government but perhaps not very much for the taxpayer?
I think there are quite a number of measures. What we call a gain to the taxpayer is more or less like a loss to government and vice versa. If I look at the so-called losses to the taxpayers, the introduction of excise duty on cosmetics, the introduction of excise duty on kerosene, the exemptions on VAT, most of the people will look at them as gains, and yet they are actually, in the long term, or in the supply chain, they become losses. Those are going to help government. And some of them, they actually may not injure anyone. Things like excise duty on cosmetics, it will only affect the profits to a certain extent of the companies that are selling those products, because excise duty is charged at source. It's charged to the manufacturer, and that's it. Whether they pass on the costs, you have a choice to buy a makeup kit, you have a choice to buy a bleaching solution, you have a choice to buy all that. So by the time you make that choice, you're actually willing to incur that cost. So the government can as well get that revenue and use it for a worthy cause.
Now let's talk about something that the National Treasury has been very keen on, saying that this budget is based on stable economic growth, 5.6% last year. Inflation right now is about 5%. The currency situation is stabilizing. Do you see this coming out, and in your opinion, do you see how the government is going to drive this huge expenditure, use that huge expenditure to drive economic growth?
I think stability of the economy is good. It's a plus, and we've been lauded even by foreigners when we are compared to other countries. Even globally, you see the rate has been reduced to about 2 point something. So Kenya being at 5% is a good thing, and us having a stable economy in which to grow and develop is a good thing. But the expenditure has issues to do with, for instance, corruption. If you have corruption, it's a cost which we are all financing. However stable we are, actually corruption will lead to inflation, and inflation will spill over to all these other macroeconomic indicators. So for me, the issue is we need to really look at revenue leakages. We need to look so much into corruption. And if we beat that and put corruption to the test, I think even the stability we are talking about will be twofold.
We are still going to be very heavy on recurrent expenditure. Over 850 billion will go to that. At the same time, the government has been talking about taming the public wage bill and reducing wastage. Do you see goodwill to achieve those two things?
It will still take me back to the issue of government having a vicious cycle. Because again, if you're saying who is corrupt, we don't know who is corrupt and where they are best. So if the problem is coming from the root, then how do you really cut it at the top? So it may be such a big problem or a big thing, an issue, where they may not easily achieve it. I'm seeing a few issues there, and still we only get the top bit. We don't know what the regulations and the procedures are, and we've not seen people come to really pay for anything they've done.
Now, we've been talking about the country's public debt at about 50% of the GDP. We are talking about 3.1 trillion shillings. We know we are going to borrow about 150 billion shillings in this coming financial year from external market. How much window do we have to borrow?
For me, I think actually the borrowing, because the ideology is that the people lend and they gain in terms of interests and all that. So there's a gain to those people. As a country, with the resources we have and everything, we can easily get the money to borrow and we'll get the debt. The question is how we use it and how we pay it back. That has always been the challenge. But in terms of getting the money to borrow, it will be there. And for me, the issue is about how to use it and how to pay it back. It is going to spill into future generations, and the country will carry on like that until probably we are colonized again in the name of paying back for the debt that we owe other countries.